Welcome to the Ambronite Superhero Podcast with Simo Suahemo. This show is your backstage pass to discussions with world-class influencers in the field of health, nutrition, and high performance. We bring you the selected tips and insights that you can use to upgrade your life and become unstoppable.
And we are live at the Superhero Podcast. We are doing this talk with Ryan Munsey, Chief Optimizer, author, podcast host. You've worn so many different titles along the years, Ryan. We're on the train here from Biohacker Summit. How do you usually introduce yourself?
That's a great question. I usually just say I'm Ryan, but no, it is tough. I've had this talk on a couple other podcasts before because I'm kind of hard to pigeonhole into like, hey, here's a dude who does one thing. He's a fitness writer, or he's a biohacker, or podcast host. And I'm very much like you. I'm easily fascinated. I'm a curious person, and I just want to pursue things, go down those rabbit holes. And it's taken me from fitness model to personal trainer, nutritionist, gym owner, biohacker, speaker, author, all these different things. And as you accumulate information, you want to share it, and that's where the author and podcast stuff has come into play. And so like you said, a lot of different hats.
So how did you initially get fascinated by the field of optimizing human performance? What's the story there?
Oh man, I guess human performance from a physical standpoint has always fascinated me. I grew up playing sports. I was a lifetime athlete. Went to Clemson, and my best friend from high school was actually a high jumper at Clemson. And by being friends with him, I got to hang out with the track team at Clemson. At the time, there were guys on that team who still play in the NFL today. I got to see, there were also 100-meter sprinters who, Clemson was where Sean Crawford went to school, and he was a 100-meter sprinter for the U.S. In the Olympics. And so football players and sprinters, I got to see, at arm's length, and you see when you've seen physical, I don't want to say perfection, but when you've seen an athlete who has that, and you've seen it that close, you just know that there's something different about them, that there's something special. And it's just something that I wanted to learn how to be a better athlete, be faster, be stronger, obviously look better. We can't ignore that is a compelling aspect of it for everybody. So that's where the physical side came from. On the mental side, I started my business, the gym, House of Strength, in 2012. And at that point, I realized that I needed to stop reading about sets and reps and training protocols. And I needed to, if anybody out there is an entrepreneur, and you know this, you wear every hat in the business.
That's right.
You clean toilets, you do the marketing, you do everything.
Every single hat on top of each other.
Yeah, and you have to learn all of it. You have to learn it all very, very fast. And that was 2012 for me. And that's when I first really was introduced to Dave Asprey and Bulletproof. I've always liked intermittent fasting, and I love coffee. So when somebody said, like, you got to check out this guy, it resonated with me.
I can believe that.
And that's when, I got introduced to Nootropics, and, it was, hey, if I can learn faster and learn better and, am better able to, communicate and share this information with other people. So 2012 and Bulletproof was really my kind of introduction to all of this.
All right. So at the Biohacker Conference, we've had a pretty heavy emphasis on cognitive performance, memory hacking, optimizing your capability to remember things, recall things, and also creativity. So tell me a bit about what you do at Natural Stacks, your company.
So Natural Stacks is an amazing company to get to work with and for. We were just talking about this on the train. The variety of people that we get to help and work with is it's mind blowing, and it's so fun because one day we're talking to a neuroscientist about how to eat and how to live a lifestyle that enables us to avoid cognitive decline, optimize our synapses in our brain. And then the next day we're talking to somebody who's literally a rocket scientist, and we're helping them, optimize their workflow and be more focused and get more out of their brain. And then the next day we're talking to somebody who takes our nootropic Siltep and climbs Mount Everest with it. And, then the next day we've got Olympic athletes, and it's so much fun to get to help people from across every spectrum, whether it's, nutrition or fitness or, coders. That common thread is that we all want to do and achieve and be more as a human.
Exactly.
So I think that common thread runs through everybody, no matter how you express it, or no matter what your pursuit is. And it's so fun to get to share that passion and to learn about everyone's unique way of doing it and practicing it.
Yeah, that's what I personally find so inspiring about the line of work you and me do as founders in this space, that it's all about human thriving, right?
Right.
No matter what your mountain, what your pursuit, there's always that extra edge that you're looking for. There's always that next level you want to be at. And speaking of that, what would be your kind of when you're looking at cognitive optimizing in a nutshell? What should someone just about to delve into this field look into as a 20-80 rule when you're really looking at what brings the 80% out?
Well, I'm as you're asking this question, I'm trying to think of like, what perspective am I going to take? How am I going to answer this? And I think,
and I know there's so many, but
there are. So
I'll let you choose this time.
So I think like since we talked about like first getting into it in 2012, I will share some of the things that first helped at that kind of beginner stage. But also now, as I'm speaking more, I have to step back and look, like you said, at that 80-20 rule. So I have to assume most people in the audience are either beginners or relatively new to this when I'm speaking. So it's you have to be very efficient at what you deliver, message-wise. But I think first and foremost, and this is because of my travel situation and coming here, sleep. It's number one. It sounds so cliche, but when we sleep, that's when our brain dumps toxins, that accumulate just through, not necessarily through what environmental or food exposure, or when we travel, we get exposed to more through being in metal tubes and pressure and time zone changes, whatever. But just normal metabolic function produced byproduct, just waste. And
yes,
we have to clear that. We have to dump that at night, and that only happens when we sleep. So, I basically had 48 hours coming over here where I had very little sleep, and I felt like I had to apologize to everybody that I met for the first time because I wasn't myself. And today is actually the first day that I'm over here that I've had 8 or 9 hours of sleep, and I can tell a huge difference in my mood, my mental sharpness, the speed at which I can think and communicate, and everything is better for having slept better.
So the real Ryan is back now?
The real Ryan is back now.
The real Ryan is back, ladies and gentlemen.
The real Ryan stood up. So
that's great. Welcome. Welcome back, Ryan.
So I think, first and foremost is sleep. Like that is by far the most powerful nootropic. And if you don't sleep, it affects you in the short term, but it also affects you in the long term. If you live a life, I just described what happened to me without clearing that metabolic waste on a daily or in an acute setting. But if that adds up, it's the same thing as like sitting. If you sit for a day, yeah, your hips and your low back hurt. But if you do that for a lifetime, you're going to develop chronic issues physically. Same thing with your mind. And that's what we see with a lot of, cognitive decline or, things like Alzheimer's. So there's tons of science and research out there that shows, that training your mind through all sorts of different practices. Obviously we want to exercise our mind in different ways, whether it's, learning an instrument or a new language or, crossword puzzles, different brain games and things like that to keep it sharp and train its different abilities. But, then we also want to do different practices like yoga or meditation, gratitude, things that, keep our brain and our mind, sharp and developing those qualities that will help us through a lifetime. So I think that's where I would start. But then if we want to dive into nootropics and go down that whole road, there's so many things that we can do to what I would call optimize traits or a day. So it's like, hey, this is Friday or this is Monday. What do I need to really get done today? And I think the most important thing that I would stress to somebody new to nootropics is you need to identify what your goal is for that given day. You and I both know this, that, some days you need to be more creative. So you want to be able to think laterally, get outside the box, link thoughts together. Then there are other days where you have to produce, or you have to get dirty in the tedious, monotonous stuff. So you want something that maybe your mind is not wandering. It's much more focused and it's a much calmer, smoother, slower burn as opposed to being like, scattered or flitting and connecting thoughts. And I call that like thinking laterally. So what are you trying to accomplish? And then realizing that all nootropics affect everybody differently. You and I could both take Siltep and have a slightly different experience. Now, in general, it's going to help us feel more engaged in what we're doing and more focused. So it's great on those days where you have to do that focused activity and, be at your best for a long period of time.
Everyone truly is different. I mean, like starting from a cup, I mean, like, people often don't notice that or don't realize that when we're talking about nootropic, it starts from a cup of coffee or a cup of tea.
It does. It's and
even those effects are different. I for example, I'm a caffeine slow metabolizer.
Okay.
So out of testing my own genome, I know that a smaller amount of caffeine is sufficient for me to get that same amount of stimulation out of it.
Yep. I am the same way, actually. I'd never go more than like 200 to 250 milligrams a day. I don't really measure that, but I just know like how much coffee I can handle. Or if I have to take it in pill form, like a lot of times when we travel, so Natural Stacks makes smart caffeine,
right?
Shameless plug. But I know if I take that I'll only take 200 milligrams a day, one in the morning and one around midday. But, I'm very sensitive to caffeine. So like I can do tea and get a stimulation, from that. Where other people can take 700, 800,000 milligrams of caffeine and not feel anything. But caffeine, coffee and tea are great. But yeah, it's to your point, and that's where I was going originally, was that every nootropic is going to affect every person differently. So in this world of nootropics, people are always asking, well, how does this compare to this? And, which one's better? And it's goal dependent. What are you trying to do with it? But it's also individual, unique, where we all have a unique brain chemistry. We're all going to respond differently to every different nootropic. So look at not what the marketing for it really says, but look at the ingredients, learn how they're supposed to affect you. Is this going to boost choline? What does choline do? That increases mental processing speed. If I'm already fast at processing things, and I know this from doing QEEGs and taking the Braverman test, which I'll tangent off of this now and just say that I would encourage anybody who's interested in pursuing nootropics to start with some sort of a baseline.
Establishing the baseline.
Yeah, understand who you are and where you want to go. It'd be like saying, it's where am I on the map? You've got to know where you are and how you work or how you tick in order to optimize yourself. Like if we took this and compared it to personal training or diet, like if you go to see a strength coach or a personal trainer, you're going to get a physical assessment and he's going to say, these are your weaknesses. This is what we need to work on. This is how we get you better. Same thing with your brain. If you lack focus, if you're not attentive, then we need to do things that, increase focus. We need to lower that alpha brainwave, increase beta brainwaves, get that ratio more into your favor. We only know this from, getting either a QEEG, so you can get your brain scan and know what kind of brainwave profile you have, or the Braverman test, like I mentioned. If you just Google Braverman test.
How do you spell that? To all of our listeners out there Googling.
Yeah. So Eric Braverman wrote the book The Edge Effect, and he's a clinical psychologist. It's Braverman.
All right. And everything is going to be on the show notes, folks. So you can drop your pencils right now.
Yeah. There's also one of those at neurotest.me.
Neurotest.me?
Yeah. And that's a quick 10-15 minute yes or no answers. So it may not be as accurate as like measuring your neurotransmitters through a urine test, but you can have the answers in 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay.
So it's a great snapshot of where you are. And if you're going to start optimizing these things and playing with them, it'll tell you that test has two parts. First part is your kind of your default setting. So you learn whether or not you're dopamine, serotonin, choline, or GABA in nature. And then the second part tells you if you have any current imbalances or deficiencies in any of those. So, I know that my nature was actually equal parts choline and dopamine.
Equal parts choline and dopamine.
Right.
So high motivation.
Yeah. And, I also know from doing the EEG that I tend to produce more alpha brain waves than the norm. So again, like I'm kind of a fast thinker. I see the big picture of things. But if I don't kind of pull that in and rein that in, then it can manifest itself as what would be classified as being ADD or, kind of getting stuck in neutral. So, for me, taking something like Siltep that we know from our studies reduces the alpha brain waves, gets me more into that focus point. So again, like I would just encourage people to get that baseline for themselves.
Sure. So when you would be looking at something like body composition, you would be looking at a kind of a gold standard way of measuring that, like a DEXA scan, like a bone density scan. So what would be the equivalent in the cognitive enhancement world
I think
of that gold standard?
I think I don't know if I would call it a gold standard, but either of those two are good starting points. QEEG, you can get a neurotransmitter test, either the Braverman. You can do that with there's urine tests for that. I think if you're going to look for a gold standard, I think the urine test would beat Braverman for the neurotransmitter test, only because it's completely objective, whereas the Braverman yes, no is subjective. You could take it today and then you could take it tomorrow after a great workout and your answers are going to be different.
Sure.
But that's also because your neurotransmitters are different after a great workout.
Absolutely. So, also a great nootropic workout.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not so surprising. So what's after determining the baseline, what would be the next step?
Well, it's figuring out what you want to do with it. So, if I am simply a coder and that's all I do, then, I'm going to want to look for things that help me increase my focus. And, I'm assuming that that's where the coder lacks. Maybe if they lack creativity, then, they need to look at something that helps boost creativity. But, we talked about this yesterday at length. Are you a producer or are you a consumer? I think most people listening to this would be a producer and they're trying to produce something. But there are days as a producer where you're either doing research or you're brainstorming or you're actually doing the writing process. So I think if you break it down into all three of those, you may want a different nootropic stack for each of those 3 days. So if I'm producing, I think that's the next step. You find out your baseline, and then it's what stacks work for me on what different day. It takes a lot of experimentation. There's no blanket statement, and that's what makes the world of nootropics both exciting and kind of tough to talk about, because so many people wanting to get started in anything want a blanket statement. But
we don't even have language for discussing many of these benefits or discussing many of these effects.
Right.
Let alone having a common standard that we could refer to.
Yeah. No, this is a very good point. So, you get your baseline, you figure out how you want to go, what your goal is. And then, I think do your research, find a couple of different types of nootropics and experiment with what works for you. We've thrown a few of them out there. I mean, with natural stacks, we look at our Siltep as kind of like the foundation. It's an everyday nootropic. And then from there, you can add things into it. Obviously, I work for Natural Stacks, so I'm very familiar with our product line. So this is not me plugging ours as much as it is I don't want to talk about somebody else's that I'm not as familiar with.
Sure.
But with dopamine and serotonin brain food, we actually have GABA and acetylcholine brain food coming out. They will be out by first quarter 2017. But the idea is that, you have all 4 of those neurotransmitters that are involved with the Braverman test. And if you know what you need, then you can take whatever you need for your needs to get into that favorable balance so that you can be at your best. And then Siltep stacks well with each of those because it works on a different pathway to increase focus and memory. So, you get that kind of mood boost that you want, or the drive, motivation, if it's dopamine. So that's really cool. And I think it allows that's our goal, is to put the resources out there, put out as many tools in the experimenter or entrepreneur or biohacker's toolbox as possible so that you can use whatever tool you need for, your either needs or wants.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that people often misunderstand about nootropics is the origin of these compounds that we use. So How would you describe you describe nootropics as compounds? As we know, many of them are actually derived from food.
Yeah, and that's a really it's an interesting topic because you're right. Most people hear nootropics and they think that it's this like a borderline, not safe thing. There are different classes of nootropics. So you have pharmaceuticals, things like modafinil that you have to have a prescription for. You have the in between, kind of the gray area where you're looking at the racetams.
Yep.
They are synthetically synthesized, but they do come from natural components. So you do have some people who will lump racetams into natural, but it's a gray area. That's why we call it a gray area.
Sure. And also regulatory wise on the grayer area.
Yeah. So
currently apparently unregulated in the US.
In the US, for us, it's not an issue, but I know that there are some US based companies that cannot get racetam products into certain countries in Europe. So that right there just shows you that, yeah, it is a gray thing.
Exactly.
But then there's also amino acids that some countries don't let in, and that falls under amino acids would fall under the category of the third class of nootropics, which is nutraceuticals, things that come from nature or food. Now at Natural Stacks, everything we do is 100% natural. So every nootropic that we make comes from vitamins, minerals, amino acids, or plants and herb. So Siltep, for example, contains 5 ingredients: artichoke extract, forskolin, phenylalanine, vitamin B6, and acetyl L-carnitine. So you have 2 amino acids, 2 herbs, and 1 B vitamin. With some of our other ones, we have caffeine from coffee and L-theanine, which is another amino acid. That's what's in smart caffeine. Serotonin brain food is, again, amino acids, and then an herb, rhodiola rosea. That's a beautiful formulation because rhodiola is an adaptogenic herb. It's been used for centuries in Chinese and Ayurvedic medicine to reduce stress and cortisol. The reason that it's the first ingredient or the main component of our serotonin brain food is that when cortisol is elevated, our body can't go down that serotonin pathway the way that we want it to. So by first reducing cortisol with rhodiola, you get this sensation of kind of a cap on the upper limit of stress that you can feel.
Interesting.
And then those other components, the precursors to serotonin brain food, are the remaining ingredients in our product. And they're just, like I said, there's zinc, there's selenium, there's vitamin B, there's L-tryptophan, which is an amino acid, and they can now go down that pathway and help us produce serotonin like we want. And that's how we get that positive mood. So we're using all natural compounds, and if formulated with, I don't want to say fragile, that's not the right word, but, if you do it in a delicate way that is sustainable for the body, which is our approach, then you can use these things on a daily basis to get both short-term benefit and long-term benefit. Is something that's safe that you can take for a long time because we're not forcing pathways. There's no down regulation. There's no receptor issues. So I think that's something you bring up a good point, that if people are skeptical when they hear the word nootropics, do the research, look into it. As a company, we're trying to educate customers and consumers on those nootropic pathways and how things work and why they work and why we are different, because not a lot of companies are doing that, and it's not really something that, like you said, there's very little language for this.
Exactly.
So it's very hard for somebody who's interested to go Google, how do nootropics work.
Yeah, we really lack the definitions and the whole landscape.
Yeah, there's no telling what you get if you Google that, or who's saying it or whatever.
Yeah. I often say that the Chinese were the original biohackers because the Chinese herbal medicine and indeed the Ayurvedic medicine has millennia of experience in taking advantage of these herbs, of these exceptional foods. So, looking at your own daily choices in food, what does your kitchen look like?
Oh man, so like I said earlier, I love intermittent fasting. So my kitchen's pretty empty in the morning. I'm also a 1 meal a day person. It just works for me. I eat once and then I'm done with eating and I can get on with my day and my life. I will wake up in the morning and either do exogenous ketones or bulletproof coffee. And then I fast until mid-afternoon where I'll have my 1 meal. I'm big proponent of either ketosis or minimal effective dose for carbohydrates. We'll come back.
And we are back on the train. You're tuned in to the Superhero Podcast. Sitting back here on the train with Ryan Munsey, Chief Optimizer. We are.
Should we tell them what we did last night between take one and take
Yeah,
two?
let's do it. So there was a 24-hour period where
We had to cut it short because the train actually stopped and it was our stop.
Yes,
We had to stop recording, get off the train.
exactly.
We hiked like several miles or kilometers through the snow-covered forest, and then we did some traditional Finnish sauna,
Yes, we did.
some ice swimming.
Completely with some dips in a freezing river.
Yes, and there was a lot of food. There was camping in the snow.
We did successfully camp. Not all of us did successfully sleep during that camping, but
and not all of us were successfully warm. The fire went out in our tent.
it did.
Yes, yes.
We managed to keep the fire alive in ours, but I think your heater or your fireplace wasn't as efficient in keeping up the heat.
I think it was human error. We failed to continue to add wood, and there was an individual who snored all night and kept us awake as well. So between the snoring and the cold, it was we didn't optimize our sleep last night, as we just finished talking about at the end of part one of this.
That's true. There was a lot of hormetic stress involved, which hopefully made our minds and bodies even tougher. The way I described it to Teemu, I think, was high intensity interval irritation, when every 15 minutes someone woke up and effectively walked right through you to like bang some woods back into the fireplace. It's a hormetic stressor.
We had 24 hours of as much hormetic stress as possible.
This is true. Condensed hormetic experience.
So we're more superhuman maybe tomorrow after we supercompensate than we were yesterday.
This is true. I'm a solid believer in that recovery will definitely make us stronger. It definitely will. Was that anything like you expected though? It's your first time in Finland, right?
It is my first time in Finland. It's my first time in Europe.
Wow.
Yeah,
All right.
Yeah.
What,
So
what a
I
first
kicked, I
time.
kicked it off with
A trip of firsts.
Yes, snowy camping in Finland.
Dude, it's hard to top that off.
It is. I think it is very close to what I expected. I knew that there was going to be some organized camping, and I was aware that some things were going to be provided, that it wasn't going to be, that we weren't going to have to hunt and kill our own food or pick our own berries, which. By the way, the food was amazing. Vessi and the Sahala estate has a full-time cook on staff,
Yes.
who was there, and I don't think she left the kitchen the whole time we were there.
I didn't see her outside the kitchen at any time. And
whenever
food was amazing.
Yeah, whenever we weren't eating, she was either preparing the next meal or cleaning up from the other one. So
Yeah.
big thank you to them.
Huge thank you to Vessi and the Sahala estate for taking good care of us.
But yeah, I think it's in some ways it was exactly what I expected, and in some ways it was nothing like what I expected. there were mocks of the American inhibition. So that being my first experience with the traditional Finnish saunas, there were some things that were new to me, and I can honestly say that I didn't expect that, but it wasn't a big deal. Just definitely didn't expect it.
Sure. So to all of our listeners, we went to have a full Finnish sauna experience, all complemented with washing, with the birches, with basically dipping into the ice cold river, getting back to the sauna, with Vessi telling us some Finnish folklore and sharing and filling us in, and with the traditional way of the Finnish sauna.
There were even some kettlebell swings in there somewhere
That's true.
outside.
Yeah. Awesome. So where we left off was I was asking you about your kitchen. What does your kitchen look like? Looking from from an chief optimizer's perspective.
It definitely does not look like the average kitchen. There's no processed food. There's much more in the refrigerator than in the pantry. The things in the pantry are more of supplements and things that assist with preparing the whole foods. So I wouldn't call myself paleo. I wouldn't call myself keto, but those are definitely words that you could probably use to describe me. That's just not how I describe myself. I do believe that we need to minimize the number of carbs that we eat over our lifetime. So for me, on a daily basis or a weekly basis, I'm trying to find the minimal effective dose. And that's going to vary for me, but also for any individual. I think that depends heavily on both the intensity and the frequency with which you exercise.
Sure.
So if I'm doing CrossFit style workouts 4 times a week, I'm going to need more carbohydrates than if I'm only doing yoga and no high intensity workouts.
Sure.
So I follow intermittent fasting. I actually do 1 meal a day, and I usually eat that sometime between 12 and 4. It just depends on the day. I don't worry about the time. I don't worry about how long it's been since my last fast. And in that 1 meal, I'm usually eating somewhere around 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram, which for me, I'm just under 200 pounds. So I'm around 100 to 150 grams of protein in a day. And I do prescribe to a high fat diet. I think there's so many benefits from that. I drink bulletproof coffee in the morning or exogenous ketones. I don't do a whole lot of ghee anymore. I usually do about a tablespoon of brain octane and maybe another tablespoon of ghee per French press for my coffee.
Mm-hmm. Any reason for you cutting down on the ghee?
I did some experiments with exogenous ketones and just felt better with less dietary fat in the morning. I felt like that helped me get more into burning body fat for fuel. It's enough to kind of kickstart that, but not so much that you don't use your own.
Right.
And yeah, so I do the coffee in the morning. On days that I don't do the coffee, I would either do exogenous ketones or I'm fasting full on for some other different reason. And then, like I said, I eat my 1 meal. If it's been a heavy lift day or if it's one of those days where I need carbs, I'll have usually about 100 to 150 grams of carbs. If I do that, then I drop my fat for the day. If I am not having carbs on that day, then I have more fat with my protein at that meal. I eat tons of vegetables. There's so many health benefits from vegetables. And, I just feel I've always felt better, more vegetables I eat. So the biggest variety and the most, the largest amount that I can eat in a given day is a win for me.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things to do in the U.S. is when I travel, I always go to Whole Foods and get the, they have the salad bar, the hot food bar, and you can just,
the big ass salad.
It's already been foraged for you. And you can get as many different vegetables as you can. There's just no way that you could eat 15 different vegetables at home without a lot of effort and a lot of like
so
leftovers or you probably could, but you'd be food prepping for a week if you did that.
That's so true. I'm a big sucker for the Whole Food salad bar. My salads always end up costing like $30 or something.
But if I only eat 1 meal a day, I can justify it.
Exactly.
Right?
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which brand of exogenous ketones have you found?
This is a good question.
Be the best one.
So I've used 2 different ones. I've used the Keto Sport Keto Kana, and I have used the Prove It Keto OS. I like both, and I think they each have their own use. So the Keto Sport is non-caffeinated and it's in a tub. So if I'm not wanting caffeine with it for some reason, or if I'm at home, I can use that one and add either smart caffeine or bulletproof coffee without the ghee and the MCT oil if I wanted the caffeine. Keto OS, I buy caffeinated and I get it in the single serve to-go packs, which are amazing for travel. You don't have to wake up and worry about how and where you're going to find coffee. You can just wake up, dump that into a water bottle and down it, and 30 seconds after you wake up, you're good to go, and that's it. So
very handy.
Yeah. So one of the other things that I've always done is I start my day with a morning drink that I call it a detox drink, but it really has nothing to do with detox. One of the ingredients is a teaspoon of sea salt.
Teaspoon of sea salt.
So it sometimes it's hard to travel with that. So the Keto OS or the Keto Kana, they both have over a gram of salt per serving. And that's something that a lot of people using exogenous ketones are not aware of, that every serving of your ketones is usually like 1.5 to 1.6 grams of sodium per serving because you're taking a ketone salt. So it makes sense.
Yeah,
but most people don't actually
think it through.
Right. So, I wouldn't have that sodium in my detox drink. I actually don't drink that detox drink on mornings when I have the ketones. But my point being that I get that salt first thing in the morning with the caffeine and the ketones when I do it that way,
Right.
which when I'm traveling is great. It's so important to stay mineralized, and the sodium first thing in the morning actually helps us upregulate blood pressure without forcing cortisol to do too much work to do that, which protects and kind of saves our adrenals. So that's why that's in my morning detox drink.
Great. And looking at your typical travel kit, right now you're in Europe for the first time.
Yeah.
We're just in the woods. How did you prepare for this trip? You had a pretty brutal flight.
Yes, the flight was brutal, but so I always, everybody that I coach or work with, I always tell people to just be as prepared as possible. And the way that I did that for myself on this trip was, an individual Tupperware container that had, I counted out how many days I was going to be gone. So 6 or 7 days, and there's 6 or 7 of each of the pills that I take every morning. So I just open that container every morning, pop those pills. I think it was 6 days for this trip. So I have 6 servings of the caffeinated ketones. I've only had like 1 or 2 of those on this trip just because things have been so weird. And
things have been very weird.
We've been fed in ways that I wasn't expecting, better than expected, which is a testimony to Temu and the guys here at Biohacker Summit. But I packed 6 bars of 100% chocolate. I packed a bunch of individual servings of organic almonds, and I packed a whole bunch of Epic protein bars. I get the uncured bacon and the venison bars.
Yeah, those are my favorite.
The 2 that have 0 sugar.
Those are super good.
So, I've got meat, I've got protein and fats, and I've got fat from the chocolate and the almonds. So meat, chocolate, and almonds, and caffeine and ketones. So I could survive for quite a few days on that. And I knew that the only thing I really needed to add was vegetables. And for me, one of the easiest things to do when I'm traveling, if I can't get to a salad bar, is sauerkraut. I love fermented vegetables. So I figured, hey, I'm in Europe, I'm in Finland. There's probably going to be some sauerkraut around.
Yep.
And we
turned out to be true too.
Yeah, it did. So combination of how do you like to eat, what of those foods can you pack easily, and what will be available where you're going to be is kind of the strategy to be successful away from home.
Yeah, love your travel kit. Simple, effective, and delicious.
Let me just say, it has to be delicious. It has to be food that you want to eat, because in often, a lot of times when we travel, you're faced with temptation, I guess, for lack of a better word, that, I know that when I'm traveling, I want to be on point. And especially with this being a work trip, I had to speak. So I can't afford to have brain fog, which, the day before when you're tired, and the day before I spoke, I was really tired. And when we are tired, we're much more likely to give in to those food temptations. So if the food that I brought to keep me on track is something that I really don't enjoy eating, I'm going to be a lot more likely to go for, food at the airport or food on the train or whatever. So I think it is important that, and it's also key to sustaining any diet plan. If you don't like what you eat, you're not going to stay on it.
Exactly. You have to find those habits that are enjoyable enough for you to make stick. And I think many of our listeners can relate to the situation where you have to be on point. You are exposed to a variety of stressors, from sleep deprivation to a tight schedule to an environment that may be something very different from what you're used to.
Mm-hmm.
Extensive travel, very limited access to good ingredients. Frankly, like for example, on this train, when you look at the cafeteria menu, you don't find that many ingredients that you could really call the types of foods that you want to be eating in a situation like this. So I think it's just so super important to find those delicious things that you want to do, that you want to incorporate as a daily habit.
Speaking of delicious things that are portable and easy to eat when you're traveling, I forgot to mention that I did have some Ambronite.
You did?
I did.
Amazing.
I don't know what day it was, but it was one of the days at the conference. It had to have been Friday, so that bailed me out too. So,
all right,
yeah.
Great. That's good to hear. That's good to hear.
Got to make sure we mention that for you.
That's so true. After all, you have to find the best products to scratch your own itch, as you're doing as well.
Right.
What's your preferred method of monitoring your ketone levels? Do you use keto sticks, or?
I use the Precision Extra monitor and do the blood ketone testing. A while ago, I tried to experiment with the urine sticks, and I don't like peeing on a strip that's that small, and you're basically peeing on your fingers, and you're going to get a very kind of subjective reading because you have to hold it up to the bottle, which you also have to touch later on, and now the bottle may be covered in your urine, and you're
not
trying
the
to
nicest UX there.
yeah, you're trying to
Not the
match colors, and it's not you compare that to a digital blood reading where it says your ketones are 2.1 millimolar. Like it's a no-brainer for me. It's a lot more expensive, and I don't test them all the time now. When I first started experimenting, I basically tested every scenario at least once so that I knew, hey, this scenario gets me there. And if I know that this scenario gets me there, I don't have to test that anymore. So like, for example, I tested first thing in the morning, the Keto Sport and the Keto OS. I know that both of those get me into ketosis. I tested Bulletproof Coffee, and I know that gets me there, but not as high of a level. So that's 3 tests, and then I don't have to test in the morning ever again, really, because I know I'm there. I may not know the exact number, but I also don't think it's worth $5 to find out.
Sure. You've established enough of a baseline that you can just roll with that.
Right.
So speaking of measuring things, we were going through quite extensively the methods that anyone could use while determining the baseline for cognitive hacking. Are there any measurements that you also take regularly, apart from those that you've experimented with and maybe have discarded from your routine?
No.
Sleep, activity levels, HRV.
Oh, okay.
Any
Yeah.
of those.
So I guess just general wellness.
Wellness,
yeah.
like
So I wear a Fitbit. I don't know how big of a fan of them I really am. My wife got one, and after about 2 or 3 weeks of her seeing all this data, me being the biohacker that I am, I was like, well, I want to see this data for myself. And it's been really fun to wear it on this trip just to see my steps and calorie burn and things like that. But I really don't put a whole lot of stock into that. It's just kind of something fun to watch. I wish that it would show HRV, but it doesn't monitor HRV. The Oura Ring is something that I'm looking into. I have not tried that yet. I talked to them this weekend. I know that it measures HRV, but it doesn't report it on the app yet.
Yeah.
So I think for me, I would love to see one piece of technology that can do it all, that can monitor sleep, can measure HRV, can do heart rate, and show it to me real time during a training session, because Aura can't do that. My Fitbit can, and it can do it right on my wrist, not on my phone, which is easy because, I mean, if I'm working out, it's very simple. The user experience is it's a very favorable experience to be able to look at my wrist and see it, as opposed to having to pull my phone out,
Definitely.
take it off of lock mode, open the app, look at it, and then I'm on my phone. I'm subject to other distractions taking me away from my workout. So I think that's something that I would love to see in biohacking. There's so many pieces of technology that are so close. They're missing. It's like each one of them is missing one other component to be able to have them all. So
it's like this Venn diagram type of, like pick 2, like usability.
Can we just get it all to overlap?
Here's
is that too much to ask?
Is that too much to ask? All you tech entrepreneurs listening, all you tracker enthusiasts listening, here's a challenge to every one of us. Either you're a creator or user, let's demand and look forward to that one simple tracker to rule them all.
Yeah, I think you would, if you could create that, you would dominate that market. And clearly the demand is there. If you look how many Fitbits have sold, worldwide, it's ridiculous.
It is.
So
yeah, I personally, I definitely share your views on that. I've solved that problem by just kind of compromising and finding good trackers for each application. For example, the Bedit or the MVQS for measuring sleep, and using specific trackers for physical activity. Also, the Ring application, as I was just telling you the other day, that the Ring application for me personally is a tough one, because you can't really do any Olympic lifting or rock climbing with the Ring. I understand what the guys are after there, and I've talked to them, and I think they're creating something great, but there's still something that I'm missing from that usability, which is independence of sport and leaving your hands for what they're supposed to be doing during physical pursuits.
Right, and that's if you're wearing this thing to be a fitness tracker and you can't wear it for the fitness activities that you do, it really serves no value.
Exactly.
And I talked to them about it, and they said that they take it off when they lift. But interestingly, I talked to Ben Greenfield about it, and he leaves his on for pull-ups and dumbbell, barbell stuff. And he said it's pretty durable and he hasn't had any issues. So
interesting.
We'll see.
Interesting. When I first got my Basis B1 tracker, that's a wrist health tracker, watch type tracker, I had the issue of kind of concentrating on performing at my best with something attached to my wrist. And I do know that this is a personal thing. I do know many friends and athletes and fellow biohackers that don't have an issue with this.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that even having something on your wrist in like a very intensive, precision, demanding pursuits and physical activities, even that for me even was limiting. So I'm still looking for that magical implant or something like that. And to be fair, when I measure, I'm willing to take that compromise. I'm willing to kind of endure through that. But maybe for me, for daily life, that would combine the daily life application and the physical activity application, which are the one and the same for every biohacker. I think there is still room for that one tracker to rule them all, as we saw.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, I think, to be clear, I mean, I'm willing to compromise as well. And, because my Fitbit doesn't monitor HRV, I'm using the iThlete Pro app and the iThlete finger sensor, which originally when I started doing HRV, I had a Polar, I don't know what number, but it was a heart rate monitor, a chest strap. And to use that in the morning, I would either have to get out of bed and get it wet and then put it on me, because I'm not going to sleep with Bluetooth running right across my heart.
Yeah.
But I would have to get up in the morning and get it wet to put it on, and then establish a connection. Or I would have to keep water next to my bed and like somehow try to pour water on the sensors without getting water in the bed, which again, UX, not very favorable.
Well, simultaneously trying to keep your heart rate at the resting,
not get agitated,
yeah, exactly,
right?
Not get pissed off,
right? So when I saw this finger sensor from iThlete, I was really, really excited. I thought it would be the perfect solution, but it's if you've been to the hospital and you've seen how they clip a thing onto the end of your finger, that's what it is. It looks like a blue toboggan for your fingertip. And it's rubber, and it's got a cord that comes out of it, and it plugs into the headphone jack on your smartphone. And the issue that I've had with that is that it takes me anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes to get a reading. And again, I'm willing to deal with that for a few weeks, but
it's a long time I'm not commit to.
Yeah, if it takes the first 12 to 20 minutes of my day to get a reading, I'm only going to put up with that for a few days or a few weeks. And even as I'm putting up with it, then I'm trying to figure out like what's a better solution for this.
Yeah. There's too much resistance for it becoming a routine for you.
Yeah, exactly. So it's another great idea. It's not working yet. So somebody please we're begging you, please solve this. That's
It's such a common phenomenon, and I think that whenever there's a new gadget out there, whenever there's a new crowdfunding project, a new paper release of a product, the first thing that crept through my mind previously was, like what are the sensors like? What are the tech specs? And nowadays, like owning way too many of these devices. Nowadays, the first question is this actually going to stick, or is it a toy that I'll be playing a couple of weeks, couple of months around with, and then maybe finding that obsolete, or just like feeling that I got the most out of that exercise and moving on.
Well, and that's one of the things that I found really interesting about the European version of Biohacker Summit compared to some of the other conferences I've seen is that, yes, we happen to be having a conversation about some of the technology that we use, but as a whole, the European mindset, at least in my experience, has been more about using what nature has given us as a way to hack biology and performance, as opposed to turning to technology for a pill or a pill for a solution.
Exactly. I find that personally intriguing and something that's often overlooked in a world obsessed by gadgets and silver bullets.
Yeah, I mean, the solutions or fixes for a lot of the stuff we're looking at are right in front of us. And I think that's why this weekend was so much fun, and, getting to work on breath work and the all the hormetic stuff that we did, and all that was in nature, and talking about foraging for food and eating locally and finding the things around you that the foods that grow around where you live that can optimize your immune system or help with brain function and, you know, all that good stuff.
Exactly. Ryan, it's been a massive pleasure sharing this adventure with you. To all of our listeners, I think the synthesis of all this could be go walk in forests. The best biohacks are they start at your backyard.
And if you find a frozen pond, definitely jump in.
Definitely
but
jump
make sure
in.
somebody's there to make sure you don't drown.
Exactly. Make sure you don't drown, but definitely push those limits. Keep on pushing those limits and expose yourself. Find a place where you feel vulnerable. We were sleeping in a freezing forest at the beginning of winter. It was wet, then it was freezing, but in the morning we still did our morning exercise. We felt, or at least I personally felt, very connected in the morning doing those exercises done by Tomi Kokko and Ben. We were just standing there in the middle of the forest doing some Kundalini breathwork exercise and some jumping jacks and yeah, to me personally, that's at the very core of what we should be looking at. That's after all, that's something that's accessible to everyone.
Yeah, it is. I don't think there's anybody that isn't able to just go outside and move and connect, decompress and disconnect from the daily grind and all that, and, you know, reconnect to nature and you get perspective on what's really important.
Exactly. It's simple, powerful. Get outdoors, guys. Ryan, thank you so much. So good hanging with you, man. We should do it more often.
My pleasure.
Let's do it again.
All right.
All right. Simo and Ryan from the Biohacking Crazy Train signing out from the Superhero Podcast. Stay healthy.
Thank you, Simo.
Thanks for listening to the Ambronite Superhero Podcast. Please check out the links, show notes, and other episodes at ambronite.com/podcast. That's AMBRONITE.com/podcast. Thanks again, and catch you in the next episode.